Alright everyone, we start off today talking about the new round of polling. I think I know why Biden's approval is slipping again, and it's slipping in a fairly big way. If you look at just the Suffolk poll that came out the other day, he was down more than 20 points. That is deep below the low water with regards to his polling. You've had several others. Rasmussen releasing its new poll, he was down 15. You had Emerson showing him down. I think 9 points. If you look at the slightly older numbers from like a week before, that go back before specifically this last election, hint, hint, that's what I think is happening here. They were not great, but they weren't this bad. The average was like 8 points down. Now, if you look at just the newer ones, he'd be down by, 14, 15 points in the aggregate. Keeping in mind, of course, those are cherry-picked polls, so the real number is probably even a few points worse than that. At this point, he is officially below water, and this might reverse slightly because of the infrastructure bill passing, but I'll get into all of that. I'll get into, again, why I think this is happening and why I think it might, if not reverse, at least not be quite so dire. And then we've got to look at the congressional polling too, because we've got a couple new polls there, and the Republicans are way out ahead, to the point where in the aggregate they're like half a point ahead. This would crush the Democrats if it goes forward and through the midterms. Now, first and foremost, keep in mind down below there will be a pinned comment with links to 4 other video hosting sites. If you're watching this video on YouTube, keep in mind I make several exclusive videos every day. Today I'll only make 2 because I also have a debate later, so I want to save my voice a little bit more, and I also want to have enough time before the debate, because it's only in a few hours, to be able to go to the grocery store, possibly, because then I can get, limes and shit like that, and then I have my debate drink and everything's happy. Also, links in the description. Archived, of course. Always use archive.today as we fight the battle, the mimetic struggle against the legacy media, which apparently Tucker Carlson now uses that term, which I find absolutely hilarious since it technically, in part, applies to Fox News as well, let's face it, but it's funny anyway. Biden's approval, I think, this is my analysis, this is my belief, I think is slumping because of Democrats getting off of board. Specifically partisan Dems that looked at the election that we just had, especially the Virginia election, which got all the press, up until the last moment when New Jersey suddenly became the bellwether of the country, and they regret that as well. If you look at the near loss in New Jersey, their loss in Virginia, the loss of the left side of the party all over the place, most people, if they have any coherent knowledge of politics and political strategy, looking at the political situation of the Democratic Party and what happened in the races, you'd blame the leftoids. That is, if you look at Virginia, that's the result mostly of critical race theory being adopted in Virginia schools. This is why the left wing is spurging out right now, going on total damage control mode. No. We need to retire the term wokeness. AOC herself by the other day alluding to this. They're now trying to do that because it's become a toxic and unlikable term. Just like critical race theory. Partially because it's derived from Marxism. But I think these are people that are blaming Joe Biden. I think these are people from the left side of the party. They looked at what happened in Virginia and Buffalo and elsewhere, and they're blaming Joe Biden. And so it's no surprise to me that the first round of polling that comes out more or less completely after this last election cycle shows him cratering again. This could, in fact, if you look at the Suffolk poll and the Rasmussen poll and a few of these others, he could lose enough points to be under 40 in the aggregate in approval. Now, here's his silver lining, going just to his polls. I'll talk about the congressional polling momentarily. The one silver lining is that some of those Democrats will probably be reabsorbed into approval based on the infrastructure deal. The problem is if it's coming mainly from people who would blame him, you'd think they'd be leftoids. The leftoids didn't even want the infrastructure deal passed separate from the pork barrel bill. Remember, there's still a $4 trillion gargantuan monstrosity waiting to explode the inflation rate up into the stratosphere at any given time that's still being talked about. It's being held back largely by the Senate because they don't have the votes, it seems, to get it through, and Manchin refuses to budge on suspending the filibuster for the specific bill, so that may not pass. That will also potentially long-term be more of a drag on Joe Biden because, of course, it shows ineptitude. Now, The problem for Joe is that any boost he gets from the infrastructure bill, I don't think takes care of the lag from the election loss that I guess is being disproportionately blamed on him. That's an oversimplification. He's only partially to blame. In McAuliffe's case, he ended his own fucking campaign. There wasn't enough loss, just drag from Biden to lose Terry McAuliffe that election. That was critical race theory. Elsewhere, it's leftoidism, in some cases just weak candidates. But then you go to the congressional polling. Democrats have a 5 or 6 point advantage over Republicans in the United States when it comes to being registered. Yet the Republicans are slightly ahead in the congressional ballot. They should be absolutely panicked right now. When I see legacy media articles, oh, don't worry, Virginia's not a bellwether. Oh, we don't know how the midterms will actually shape up. It's not as bad as it seems. Don't worry, Democrats, you're still winning the culture war. Are you goddamn out of your mind? Maybe these people are like secret Republican Party agents or something, just trying to keep the Democrats from flipping out and doing what they'll need to do to have any chance of holding the House or Senate. But that's just not reality. You were like 4 points ahead in the generic ballot, and now you're half a point behind. Again, in an aggregate that tends to slightly oversample the Democratic Party. With the congressional ballot, if you're looking just nationwide, makes a little bit more sense than in state polling, which is why we have so many problems with the competitive states in regards to presidential election analysis and predictions. You have to look at... by the way, another thing. When you use RCP, this is just about analysis, and then I'll get back to that briefly. Make sure to look at what the sample pertains to. RV means registered voters, LV means likely voters, and A means adults. That's why if you see a poll on there that says A next to it and it deviates wildly like you do right now on, I can't remember which poll, which showed Biden actually, I think, above water in the polling, you can ignore it. It's horse shit. It's horseshit because it's not even looking at people that are necessarily eligible to vote. They just confirm the person's an adult and said, who do you want to vote for, who do you approve, who do you disapprove of, etc. In the congressional polling, if the Democrats aren't at least about 2.5, 3 points ahead come midterm day, they will lose the House and Senate. Similar margin to Terry McAuliffe, what he had to be ahead in. That's because of sampling bias, and mainly that's because of the differential. But I mean, they don't have to have more voters across the board. They need to be an even match. But if the Republicans that have that 5 point disadvantage turn out more people, if you have higher turnout and higher intent to vote for the Republicans, they will run away with it in a landslide that will match the Tea Party surge. If that happens, Biden immediately becomes a lame duck. No complaints here, by the way. And you might have the votes. You could, in theory, this is theoretical, and it's a long shot, you could theoretically end up with enough votes to impeach and remove Biden and Kamala Harris from office. Just so that the Democrats that are partisan are aware of what they're playing with, how much fire that is, you could potentially see your president and his running mate booted out of office, and you could end up with Pelosi, subsequently booted out or forced to resign to not be in the line of succession, and the Republicans, in theory, could get rid of him. And if his approval's low enough for that situation to happen, the American people, I don't think, would mind that much. Dem partisans might. Liberals will chalk it up to a coup or Russia or something, but you've already exhausted that ammo to the point where I don't think it will work. Certainly cause a lot of social alienation in the country. But anyway, I don't know what Biden thinks he's doing. The problem for him is that there's nothing after the infrastructure bill lined up for him to do. There's nothing big for him to actually capitalize on. So if the economy continues to suck and the border stays porous and crime continues to be high and the leftoids, as they definitely will, continue to hawk their critical race theory bullshit, he's going to continue suffering attrition all the way through the midterms. I would be surprised if he wasn't lower down on midterm day, especially with the rampant inflation and the shortages, and he's not doing anything to make them better. If his mandate kicks in, both of those things will get far worse. I've got insider knowledge. I've got people showing me their work pages and shipping companies and shit every single day at this point. And by the way, if you're in trucking or if you work on a ship or a dock or something, give me some info so I know what's happening so that I can distribute that to other people. We need to warn people about shortages. And if I get the sense that things are going to blow up a week later, I'm going to tell people that, and hopefully we can save people a lot of stress and shortage problems, potentially lives. He's got some elderly person who can't get to the store anyway. There's going to be a shortage of gasoline, and they're going to be in their house for the next 2 weeks, and they only got a can of peas. They could starve to death. So that can, someone's got a baby, and maybe they should have extra formula at the moment, unless they're breastfeeding. Then they should have extra food for themselves. Looking at the situation, I think that things will get worse, especially economically. And I think that Biden's approval will be at least as low as it is now in the midterms. That'll drag down ballot. The congressional polling, though, somehow is even more damning. This is barely precedented when you have, again, a politically partisan structure in the country where the Democrats have an ingrained advantage. Now, this doesn't necessarily affect the Senate as much, because a lot of it's concentrated in a few states, big cities. It certainly affects the House. It certainly affects, turnout in general affects it, I think, almost even more. And, the Republicans have an advantage there, too. It's a double whammy. It's going to be one hell of a doozy. That's about all. Peace out.